Hello, welcome to the Performance Economy. We're back after a few weeks of being away. I'm your host, Martin Sandu. Actually, I've already made a mistake. I'm not your host. I'm your co-host. I'm going to bring my co-host on, Will, in a minute. But for those people who do follow us and are watching this, why don't you subscribe? We are trying to build up this channel. We're trying to give you value. We're talking about stuff that's going to impact you. We're talking about the job market, the economy, business, performance, productivity, the future of work. So this all impacts you, your friends, and your family. So why don't you subscribe, like what we're doing, and share the news and spread the news. And we would really appreciate it because we're trying to grow our community and let people know about what's going on. So we have been away for a few weeks. We've been busy. I've been working with my co-founder of at Mindora, Will, who is joining us now. Will, welcome back. It's been a few weeks.
It has. You had a little bit of vacation, and then we had a bit of time kind of building in the trenches.
We're machines. Yeah. We don't go on holiday.
Literally. I mean, workations, right? We just crack on. But yeah, we've been focused really on the initial build phase. So it's now time to get a few more guests on, isn't it?
That's true. Well, I mean, yeah, we've been focused on the build phase. Why don't we give the guys a little bit of information, kind of what we're doing, or what our plans are? I think it's important, obviously, and how it impacts what we talk about here on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no denying it at this point. I mean, week by week, more news around performance declines, productivity declines, economy declines, ultimately, right? So the thing's getting worse week by week at this point from the news standpoint. So we've been in a research phase for 2 years, building intelligence frameworks that can help contribute towards solving these productivity and performance issues. So ultimately, we're creating a work intelligence platform that can help companies and individuals know how to be productive whilst preserving health, right? We don't believe in burnout here at Mindora, do we, Martin?
No, absolutely not. And why don't we talk about our guest that we've got on today? Just give us a little bit of insight into Dr. Sam.
Absolutely. So I remember being tagged in a conversation where Dr. Sam was articulating some very important points around performance psychology with elite athletes. So when I got tagged in the conversation, I was very intrigued, and there was lots of different professionals giving their say. So Dr. Sam and I have been connected since then. So Dr. Sam, just briefly, I'll give her another introduction before she comes on. Founder, managing director, principal psychologist at the Sam Center. Over 30 years of experience within clinical health and sports psychology. Sam works with elite athletes, health professionals, executives, day to day, right? So for someone that's got so much experience, I know for a fact I am super duper excited for this episode, and I know you are too, Martin.
Absolutely, 100%. And we'll get to Sam in a minute. As always, we like to talk about stuff that's going on in the economy, how it impacts the future of work. And there's a couple of articles here, which I'll just bring on screen. I'm not sure if many people saw this. I wrote a post about it last week. I think it's kind of something that is on the horizon for many, many organizations, and Lloyd's in particular here, looking at axing 5% of employees, the weakest 5%. It's quite a US move, this in particular. One of the things I was interested in, Will, and we'll speak about this, I'll also get your comments on this in a minute. Sort of high-performing organizations routinely reviewed the bottom 5% of the workforce, with about half of those leaving. The practice, referred to as a rank and yank, was popularized by General Electric in the 80s and 90s. And as I said, it seems like a very much of a US-style move, or US bank-style move as well. This is something that really can't be ignored, right? Like here in the UK, I guess in Europe as well in particular. It's improve or you're gone. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I look at it from a few different standpoints, because there's a lot of variables to pick out there. Because it's not as simple as, the bottom 5% are getting axed. I think there's a lot more complexity to this. So if you look at it from performance management as a whole, the questions I ask straight away, are how much guidance have employee pools or cohorts within companies, how much guidance have they been given to understand what productivity is? Perhaps they have, but if you're then threatening a bottom chunk, perhaps it's performance related. So my question off the bat is, how much guidance have they been given towards achieving set performance, right? Because we know now categorically 43% of the global workforce are working on low value tasks. So that's the first thing I'm asking is how productive are you allowing your people to be? First question. Second question is it might not be a long-term kind of power play. It might just be to mitigate short-term performance issues, right? So initially it might, reduce cost, of course, not headcount, but then you have to look at, well, will reducing that kind of chunk of employee headcount, will that affect the long-term kind of performance? So you've got kind of what's going to work in the short term, how it's going to affect the long term, how much guidance were the employees given to hit those targets. So, and also we know about automation. So is it an automation play? Do they believe that the 5% they're getting rid of ultimately can be replaced with automation? So I think there's a lot of questions that I would want to ask to get a real clear picture of the situation.
Yeah, I think this is another one that popped up as well. In fact, that's not the other one. So just give me a second. Sorry, I've lost that already. Been out of the game for a couple of weeks and forgot how to use the software over here, but we're back here now. Here we go. So yeah, this is just another one which was interesting. The PwC cutting jobs. They made, I mean, as with many businesses, they made a lot of hire after the sort of that COVID bubble of cash that came in, right? We've seen it in the tech industry in particular, the sort of the big giants as well, cutting jobs. It's interesting though that you mentioned cost management and operational transformation, as they're calling it. Basically, what you just mentioned. Actually, their actual profits rose, but obviously they're still making significant cuts as their growth. I guess their forecast is down. In particular, a lack of lucrative Saudi Arabian projects. There's been a ban, I guess, imposed on. I guess outside companies taking as much of the sovereign wealth fund as they have previously. More business for Saudi business, which makes sense. It means it's a general thing that's going on around the world. Countries are looking after themselves first, which is the trend at the moment. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned obviously cost management, operational transformation, looking at using automation. Just getting your thoughts on this one that's impacting the UK market.
Yeah, I mean, whenever revenue is going to slow down, it's going to force cost prioritization. So you're going to look at ways in which you can perhaps mitigate any further risks despite revenue kind of cost factors. So this also looks at leaning into efficiency versus growth. So perhaps it's an efficiency play. Obviously, we know part of it is because of the Saudi Arabian connection, but again, there's probably a lot more beneath the surface that you can pull from it. But also, it indicates perhaps a job cut signal as a risk, right? So ultimately, that could make other employees think, "Oh, I better perform better, so that I am not next." So that could cause a bit of fear, right? It could lower morale. So again, productivity is not a simple linear kind of phenomenology. There's so many different complex variables to take into account that equates success over time. So yeah, it's a very intriguing kind of situation right now in the job market, Martin.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, we've got a question coming from Adam Ahmed, which we know very well. Thanks, Adam, for your question. I think this was related to basically the Lloyd staff, where we were talking about performance. What if the system structures and process don't support performance? Interesting question. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's one of the points I made, right? It's one of the first points I made, actually, about how are organizations kind of providing the platform for performance, right? Because that's very, very important. Knowing what to do, when to do it, knowing, being given the tools to preserve your health and well-being and vitality, right? So you're not burning out. Because oftentimes when productivity kind of slows, and I know this from over a decade of research in these fields, I know oftentimes when performance slows, oftentimes company owners want to put more work on people's plates, right? But that's quite backwards. So I agree with the question that's come in from Adam. It has a massive effect if the support structures are simply not there to allow people to perform. So it's a really key question that's being posed.
Absolutely. So maybe finishing on some positive news for the UK anyway, in particular, because it seems to be on a downward trend at the moment. maybe gives Keir Starmer a little bit of relief, maybe for a day. But yeah, basically in terms of investment pledge from the US, 150 billion into the UK. I think obviously to sweeten it with Trump coming over for his royal visit, in particular. Obviously, job creation is really, really good and positive with any sort of investment, especially I think this has come from BlackRock in particular. Blackstone, sorry. Blackstone. Yeah, Blackstone, that's the one. I was just interested, I picked this up at the bottom, obviously from Nick Clegg, who I won't get to politics, but yeah, it's not my favorite person. But basically, yeah, I mean, it was quite nice talking about the investments were crumbs from the Silicon Valley table, and it is crumbs. But this was an interesting one as well, especially for us from Mindora's perspective. I mean, we've noticed this as well, that a lot of British startups tend to end up in the US as they seek investment. So not only do we import all their technology, we export all our good people and good ideas as well, which actually with Trump and his visa policy as well, what he's done, there's a lot of maybe exodus of talent or people not going to go to the US. And that's another opportunity for the UK, which we would be interested to get your take on this. But yeah, just interested to hear your thoughts on this in general.
Yeah, well, there's been quite a lot of US investment from various different organizations with NVIDIA, committing $500 million to a UK AI tech startup as well. So it's following a trend. And I remember speaking in the House of Commons about these problems and kind of having conversations with government officials after. And they were speaking about how in the coming years, there's going to be quite a sizable amount of investment coming in to the UK, which when we met, if you remember, Martin, an event as well at Google where we met with Brent Hoberman that one time, he's also championing all of these initiatives as well. So we've been aware that investment is going to be coming in, but it was just when, right? There's one thing knowing that something's coming. There's another thing actually happening. Well, it's actually happening. So this not only is going to bolster the UK kind of tech talent market, so to speak, and those wanting to stay here, but ultimately, if the US is going to invest, and there's going to be alternative investments coming in from the US, but also from overseas as well. So I only see it being a good thing for the whole AI kind of infrastructure here in the UK. More investment, more talent, hopefully more innovation. Hopefully that then kind of equates to productivity multipliers. That's the intention, I guess.
Absolutely, 100%. So, and on some good news, and this is my favorite part because we get to learn from the experts. We get to learn from the industry experts in particular. So, Will, do you want to introduce today's guest?
Absolutely. So, drawing on her experience in neuroscience and high-performance psychology, Dr. Sam helps people and organizations unlock sustainable productivity and thrive under pressure. With her leadership roles at the Australian Institute of Sport Medicine Australia, and across the academic and clinical environments, she brings a unique lens to the question that I am super keen to dive into today. How do we maximize human performance in a way that is both healthy and productive? So without further ado, Martin, let's welcome our guest, Dr. Sam McLeod. Sam, how are you?
Oh, well, thanks. Geez, I feel really pumped up after that intro. Thank you. I think you should do my bio.
Look, I've done it a few times now, so I'm getting good at it. But yeah, Dr. Sam, since we were tagged on LinkedIn with that conversation about performance psychology and the mindset of athletes, I've been super keen to speak to you directly. So how about we get straight into it?
Yeah, cool.
Fantastic.
I had so many thoughts as you were talking. My brain was going nuts.
I love that. Well,
We'll
get to a whole bunch today, and then whatever you want to kind of chime in and add in, like, feel free. This is very conversational. So my first question right off the bat is, from your standpoint, how does understanding the brain itself help us unlock higher levels of focus, energy, and flow?
Yeah, lovely. I think it's I say to the psychs that I supervise that we're supposed to be the experts in human behavior and the mind. And despite the fact that we learn about the brain, we don't actually use the science very much in our performance settings. We tend to rely on coping strategies or mental skills or, doing a lot of treatment and we don't actually take the way the human brain works into that environment. So not only do we all have different brains, right? So if you're talking about performance in a setting, you do have to understand the individuals that you have and the collective as a whole. But even within brains, there are neurodivergent brains, which actually can become great entrepreneurs, great sports people, great businessmen, and that isn't very understood, particularly in the business world. I think it's getting more understood in sport. But if you don't understand how the brain works, then you can't really construct the environment and the conditions that they live in and work in. That because the brain governs everything. You know, we talk even in athletics, they talk about physical performance. But the brain is what governs the body. You know, it's not the other way around that we do the body and then, you know, you're sending messages to the brain. So I think it's left out. It's particularly something that I'm very interested in bringing into the sport environment. And I don't really think it's used in business very much at all. Yeah.
Martin, that's fascinating. You know, designing your work environments based on how the brains of your people work. That seems for me personally, that is it's rational, it's logical.
So I was going to say, it seems like common sense.
Yeah,
it's not being done.
Yeah.
But it's not being done.
Yeah.
We're talking about being productive, and we're not aligning our people to how they actually work, literally work.
Yeah, and everyone's obsessed. You know, most people are obsessed with making their bodies feel good and better, but actually they forget what's here, right? And this actually the driver. This is what needs to work. And I was just thinking about. I might just drop my kids off at school, and I'm currently, you know, trying to get them into sports, trying to keep them fit, trying to, you know, they're on the computers, they're on their iPads, right? I'm trying to get them active and movement. But actually, the one thing I haven't thought about, and maybe not at school, is like everyone's brain is different. Everyone, you know, takes information differently. I don't do this at education level where they almost categorize.
Yes.
Actually, maybe it needs to start earlier.
Yeah. I actually say there's two things I say to so many fields that I work in. One is we're not taking the science of psychology and the science of education, of learning principles into all business or performance settings. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's, you know, it could be theatre, it could be sport, it could be music, it could be, you know, any business where people are supposed to be learning and growing and being productive. Right. So, and I don't think I'm constantly working with teachers and schools for them to understand the brains of the children. And because they've got so many kids, 35 kids, they're just teaching one way. Even in the footy club I work with, you know, they got 44 guys. So they design programs sort of generically, and it doesn't necessarily hit the mark for the individuals unless it's requested or, you know, you kind of guide them.
Fascinating. How then do you, one step back, let's assume you're a head coach, or let's assume you are a business leader within a large corporate. What steps would you take then to start understanding how your people's brains function?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking as you were talking before about the articles and saying one of the arms of my business is to help people set up their businesses, to mentor them in the business development from scratch, you know, if they wanted a private practice. And everyone focuses on the business plan, and in the business plan, it's all about revenue and market and you know, is this going to be a sustainable and productive business? But nobody puts in the business plan about the people. The people that you want to work there, the kind of people who is good for this industry. That's the first thing I thought about. The other thing is I spend an enormous amount of time getting to know the people in my private practice, who I interview, every athlete or client that comes across. I probably do, you know, hours more than most people do, because I say, I'm the mirror. And I just want you to reflect yourself, your individuality, but I have to understand your heart, your head, your mind, and spirit. I have to know how you're thinking, you know, get inside your brain. so that I can design an intervention or help you perform and create that environment. So when you think about businesses, they interview people, and what are the questions they ask them? They don't ask them anything about themselves.
No.
Wouldn't have a clue how they learn. They don't know if they're a visual learner, and they're just talking to them in meetings and they can't remember anything and they walk out. They don't ask them anything about the way they function optimally. And if you want to be a sustainable business, you have to understand how the individuals in it work optimally.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be, well, we want this, so we want you to do this and do it our way.
I'm on the exact same page here. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because of this massive hole in kind of productivity declines. And one of the things that Gartner reported on for the reason why productivity is declining is because of disengaged employees. So the way I see it is when employees are disengaged, they don't want to be there. And a big chunk of that kind of figure is because they don't feel comfortable to work within the jobs where they don't feel psychologically safe, for instance. It's a big one in their report is psychological safety. So with that being said, then psychological safety, how does that limit productivity in your standpoint from a kind of a cognitive, from an emotional standpoint? How does that have an effect?
It's massive. You know, I've heard people talk about their environments, and the people who are in management keep saying their organisation is psychologically safe. That's not how it's defined. It's defined by your workers. It's defined by your employees. Do they feel comfortable to speak up in meetings is one of the first things. People won't speak within their peers. Maybe it'll be too challenging. Maybe it'll work against me. So they don't speak the truth. And I've seen this in even organisations that think they're encouraging openness, because they don't understand what the motivations are for a human and what needs to happen. So when it's performance driven, and you could get cut, which is sport and business, what you were talking about before, people aren't going to share the stuff that could be vulnerability, that could inevitably end up with them in the pile, the 5% that are going. Right? Because if they didn't sign on knowing that organisation values the human and the diversity that it brings, if there's never been a conversation about it, then they will assume that that's a weakness. So understanding the motivations, they'll say, oh, they tell me. And I said, well, you don't actually know that they're telling you everything. You just hear what you hear. But when they're in a safe environment, obviously a psychology spaces environment, because it's confidential until you gain consent. So what I hear and what we hear is that they're not, and we're encouraging them to be themselves and try and be kind of authentic in environments that don't actually appreciate it or value it. You can't challenge people, in sport, you can challenge people probably more than in business. Yeah. Because they give people a pretty good go at developing and getting to a certain point. And it's kind of the environment that they're used to, coaches doing that and athletes doing that. But it doesn't mean it will change, and it doesn't mean it's been valued by board down. What's the board driving, and how is that being driven into organisations so people understand this is what we want. I also don't think, it's all about the focus is down to the staff and the employees, but there has to be, that approach that everybody learns. Managers have to still learn. Executives still have to learn. And I say every day, I'm learning from my clients, even though I'm 30 years out, because when you hear, I think I know most things. I think I can take good hunches, and I know how a human brain works, and they shock me every day. I think, wow. Wow, I hadn't thought of that, And so if people can be open, they will learn from their staff by listening to them, letting them be themselves. They will stifle ideas, peer group pressure. A lot of people want to be accepted and liked, rather than actually be the only one in the room that speaks up. Whereas why do we know that, with neurodiversity, we know that the people with the different brains and the different ideas are the ones that create change.
Right.
Yeah.
What then would you give as advice? So you mentioned a moment ago about how maybe in sports you can speak up a bit more. I know that, right? Because I come from an elite football environment. So I know that if something's not quite right, then maybe I can speak because I know that I'm safe in my environment. So I understand that because a bit of a different developmental thesis, perhaps from the business world. What can leaders take from the elite athletic environment into the business world, from your opinion?
Yeah, I think as you said before, kind of the bottom line, the staff go, the 5% go, but there's not enough investment in the people who are managing people, and they're kind of taking on too much, and their own emotional intelligence. They need to put more work into, not necessarily what their business is and the content of the business, but into the people and developing emotional intelligence, leadership traits, even just interpersonal skills. I've seen so many businesses, people get promoted up into manager just because they've been there a long time. They don't actually have good managerial skills. They don't have interpersonal skills. And if people don't feel seen, heard, valued, and have some autonomy and control over their work, if they're micromanaged, well, you're not going to keep them happy for very long, and they're going to underperform. So, we know what the predictors of productivity, but nobody's putting energy into it. They want to spend all this money on other stuff. Right?
We know full well. Martin and I know full well. So then, I like this kind of athlete mindset narrative that's we got going on. One step back, with athletes and sustaining performance over the long season or a long career, how can those ideals of career longevity, of performance longevity, how can we take those ideals into high pressurized workplaces? I think it's so important.
Yeah. I mean, it is. That's why my mind was wobbling before. I was like, there are so many parallels between what we try and implement in a high performance sport environment that isn't taken into business or education. I think really, it doesn't make any sense to me, because if we've all been trained to do that in one domain, it certainly will be used. And the sports psychs are now doing a lot of work across business because of that. I think it starts off, though. I don't think most businesses, when they're employing someone, they're kind of employing someone for a role and plugging a hole, and someone's left and they need an accountant or they need whatever. And they're not at the forefront of saying, we want optimal performance or growth for this person, like sport is. You come in, you're drafted into the AFL, or you're recruited for a team, or you're at the VIS. They've got KPIs around getting to the podium, and to keep their scholarships. So everyone, all the multidisciplinary team, is working for that individual. Yeah. And we might sit around a table at the VIS. I say it's amazing. It's elite. They don't get paid. They're not professional. I work in professional sport, but to watch how the institutes of sports get around each athlete. Every 2 weeks, we have about 10 experts sitting around a table talking about every individual athlete and what can we put in, like an engineering team for a supercar. Yeah. And then we put our little bit into them and they accept it, and there's no, I don't want to do it. This is part of them being it, and off they go. We try it, we tweak it, we review it. And it's constant for 4 years until they make the, Olympics and then a podium. So that's how it's set up, right? And what I think is, well, people plug holes, and then there's not that investment in trying to help them do that, because even elite athletes, they love their sport, but they don't often know the science behind performing optimal performance. And employees just want a job and an income for their families. They don't know what it means to optimally perform in this environment. So unless there are experts gathering around, and we call it wrap around that support, getting making sure the people who are looking after them, this is the other big thing I keep ranting about. Nobody listens to me half the time, but I keep saying, it's not about thanks.
We are
Not
listening,
about-
believe me.
Nobody, I think it's a throwaway comment, but to me it's so meaningful. When you're in high performance sport, it's not about the athletes high performing. It's about the support staff being high performers and keeping them well, keeping them very well, so they can give all of their expertise. Most athletes put in so many hours and they're so passionate and motivated, they can play their sport with the right support. But we get it wrong. We put everything into driving those athletes to perform. Most of the staff are burnt out season after season after season because they're doing multiple roles. They're not well. There's athletes aren't well. We've got mental health stuff going on, and yet we demand optimal performance. And you said there is no optimal performance without well-being and mental health. But it's over here. It's separated. Oh, there's mental health and well-being. Nobody gets who can be. How do you even know your potential? How do you even know your potential if you are impacted by mental health? You don't even know what you can do yet until you get well. And I say that to business people all the time.
I'm honestly, because you're speaking directly to my soul, genuinely. like I've been in research around these kind of facilities, capacities, topics for about 8 to 9 years, perhaps, of my 10 to 12 year research career, and I couldn't be more on board with your mindset. Because my background from the age of 9 through to perhaps 27, I've been in the elite football environment. So when I was kind of bouncing between football and the business world, I'd always be like, well, why are my teammates not being given their own protocols? Why is everyone being left their own devices with their work? There's no camaraderie. There's no kind of teamwork. There's no my manager isn't quite good over here. So it's kind of why are these mindsets not being adopted?
Yeah.
Because we can, when you, like you said, focus on the individual and the team and ensuring that hyper-personalization happens because everyone's different, that's them collectively moving the needle. That's what productivity is. That's what predicting performance is.
Yes.
So I've always been a bit bamboozled and perplexed when the corporate world just never, ever has anything of the kind thought of or even drafted.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm still fascinated by it. That's why that's why I'll probably never retire, because I'm trying I'm trying to understand, why do human brains not get this, right? It's kind of just so fundamental to me. But I think in sport, if I took it in sport, it's probably similar to business, actually. There's a people don't know what they don't know. So, and psychology, in the UK, it's probably similar or maybe a little bit better, but certainly sports psychology here is, it's not many have full-time gigs, and there's one person normally against, kind of everyone else, and there's a few physios and everything. So there's one voice, which I think is hard. And in organizations, you might have an org psych or somebody who knows this stuff, but it's not their role. So I actually think in sport, definitely still at the highest level, if they need to cut costs on something, if it's the services and that, the psych will go first, because they'll put into physical conditioning and physio and myotherapy, and they will not cut those at the expense, which to me is they don't get it.
Yeah.
Even the fact that those athletes are getting injured and need those services, they don't understand. Their fatigue and their cognitive fatigue and their burnout and their mental health and all those risk factors are adding to that. But I have seen, I think, and this is why I loved what you were doing and talking about an AI model, and in sport and business, it is about data, right? And I think being able to put things into a model or statistics that they understand. Coaches are used to that, strength and conditioning coach. They want to see the data. And And, not many psychs. I obviously was a researcher, did PhD, and I still do research. So I kind of work as a research scientist, even in my clinical work. I'm always categorizing. I'm trying to get themes. I'm trying to see what's better, evaluate it. So I think we need to do a better job of actually putting it into data. And I've started an innovative project with some psychs in the US who are looking at athletic intelligence, which I've just absolutely loved because it's right up my alley. And there is data, right? And it seems to be able to be talking to all the key stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're listening. So I think that's what is needed so that people get it. They don't get just one expert or one person saying something. They won't even believe 30 years of experience of talking to people hour after hour after hour, getting inside their heads and hearts. They still think that they know better. They know best for their business, for their sport. They know them better. It's all of this kind of stuff. And that's human nature too, right?
Yeah.
All of that is human nature.
I'm guilty of that. As what I love about these conversations each time we do this is I learn something new, makes me a better human being, makes me a better boss, makes me a better dad, to be honest, as well, if I'm being realistic. Like, we're trying to implement some of this stuff with my children and hopefully give them a better start on that cycle. But in terms of business in particular, as an employer, and we worked in business for 17 plus years, when you were talking about stuff, I was like, that's me, that was me. I plugged the gap, filled the gap, you hire the employees. The support structure around them wasn't there, and we had quite a cycle of people leaving. It tended to be every couple of years. They'd come, get what they needed, they'd hit a ceiling because the support structure wasn't there to take to that level, and they would go. And actually, one of the things I've been doing from listening to obviously and working with Will and doing these podcasts is I thought a couple of weeks ago I'd look at rewriting my entire processes through HR, but with the stuff in mind, like what we've been learning. So, you asked about the onboarding. When we ask them, we do an interview, but we don't ask them, how do they learn? Are they a visual learner? And actually, you don't learn that until you have that employee and you go through that process, which is, it might be 1 to 2, maybe 3 to 6 months before you figure that out. And that's not good for them, and it's not good for you, and it's not good for the business. So I think, for me personally, I'm looking at completely rewriting our processes and systems with a view of the future of work. And obviously we'll be doing that with Mindora as well. But I find these conversations fascinating, and it's always learning.
Yeah, I think the same about my own business, right? I was self-employed for a long time, and I intentionally worked in other people's practices. I didn't want to go out and get a group practice until I learned all the mistakes that they made with people, me being one of them, right? And then I was going to open my own one, covering off on all of that. But because now the SAM Centre has been open since 2009, and we got through the pandemic, and that was freaking a nightmare, working 20-hour days, like mental health and running the business and being the job keeper person and the policy person and everything. And so, I'm pretty confident that we're going to be okay. But because of my consultancy roles and how much I'm away and doing stuff, it's been a constant thing on my mind. I know how to create a great team and a long-term team, but they do want touch points with you, right? Because you're that person that can actually help them. And people are always amazed at my interview process, because I'm very organic in my interview process, because I'm looking at how they react to me, how they respond, how they talk, let them talk, so I can learn stuff. I ask them questions that they're thinking, how weird, I haven't even got the job yet, but I'm trying to get them to imagine, right? Because it's not their fault. If I put them on the front desk and then, we don't know, they might have anxiety, right? And you're over the top of them, kind of telling them to do this, and then they're failing. They're making mistakes. That's not them. That's a mismatch. And in sport psychology, we talk about the climate. The motivational climate has to match the personality kind of motivational style. So if I encourage them, I say, you know, how do you like, would you be nervous if I come over the back of you and if I talk? I'm going to walk down that hall and I've got like 5 seconds before I go back in that room, and I'm going to say 3 things I need done for you to get on the phone. How's that going to make you feel? They're the kind of things that I allow them to tell me that, so that I don't set them up to fail, right? Because, and I've also learned, and this is about who's the support team for me. You know, I'm recruiting mostly psychology students, but high level thinkers or athletes, because they're used to this. It's a high performance environment that any medical clinic is. And I need stuff done because I'm busy. So, and I tell them that this is what I'm going to be like. Don't take this personally. So all those scenarios where you know that people can read reactions, but they never talk to the person about it. They just say, oh, they're no good.
Yeah. Can I just ask a question? One of the things that we've got some questions that have come up comments that have come up, but one of them is around stress, and I'm just interested to get your take on this, actually. So this is from Adam again. Thanks, Adam. Most individuals and organizations streak stress minimizing, wherever that stress comes from, but where optimal peak performance requires a different relationship with stress. I'd be interested to get your take on that, because I think this is a really interesting take.
Yeah, this is why I found the high performers. So some of my psychology students who are also athletes, elite athletes, I notice that if I don't challenge them enough, if I don't give them enough, if they get a bit bored with their everyday tasks, then they actually underperform. And that's about their arousal level, right? So we need a certain level of stress and arousal to optimally perform, but it's different for everyone. And not everyone, I say this all the time, you know, to coaches, not everyone needs to be calm. Calm is not the right word to get optimal performance, right? Some people like calm. They want to be 4 out of 10 on this, stress level. But a lot of other people function best at a 7 out of 10. And they like that feeling, and they think that's good nerves, and they've got clarity, and they've got focus, and they get in flow when they're in that state. So it's about understanding the arousal state, and just minimizing stress isn't the key. It's understanding what the stresses are. So I had a classic quote, and I think about it all the time. I hired somebody that was very high functioning, but she only could give me a few hours, but she was kind of my HR person, but I just loved the way she thought. And there was one staff member we had that I just couldn't understand. Like, it was like she completely shut down her brain. She just couldn't, she got to a point where she couldn't function, even though we thought we were doing all of this stuff. And I just said, I'm perplexed. Even I'm perplexed. Like, what's going on here? And she said, well, this environment for her is toxic. Even though it wasn't a toxic environment, it's just how her brain goes and what was happening for her and outside. She couldn't work in that environment. She needed to not have so many multitasking, not have this kind of stuff. So that made complete sense to me, and that's about the environment. And I say to staff all the time that I'm training to get jobs, you are meant to be interviewing the interviewer, the employee, not the other way around. You need to pick your right context, your right environment, your right values, your right culture for you to express yourself authentically. Do not be flattered that they want you, because you will not see. It's like a relationship. We're in the honeymoon period for 2 years, and then it just goes right. They're going to say anything to get you, and then 2 years down the track, you're going to see what it's really like. So ask the questions, speak to people, speak to managers, speak to ex-staff, because you will feel like you failed and you're taking that low confidence into the next role. And it affects people's mental health. Even very capable, like high IQ people I've seen, if they're made redundant just for no fault of their own, just that the company had to do that shame can sit with them for years, because they feel like they failed. And if they don't get help for that, they actually start from that point in the next job. So
that's interesting as well, isn't it? Like the lingering emotionalization from an experience, and how that stores, creating the neural pathway that repeats again and again and again. I know full well these things. Look, Sam, I have for you.
Yeah.
I could have you on this show the whole day.
Okay.
Martin and I could have you on for the whole day. But I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
What's your vision? What's your vision for, I guess, an integrated framework for peak performance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even my slogan for my business is I want the people that are supporting high performance to live with vitality and to thrive. It not be that they give everything up. So, but also I want the athletes to be, I want them to be whole individuals and happy and healthy. And, you know, because I feel like unless you get there, I've seen some instances, but people have been working with me for years across 3 Olympics, right? 12 years until they're free from this and they're really optimally thriving. And that to me, it's funny. I don't cry. I can hear all sorts of trauma. I can hear the worst thing you can possibly think of, and I'm with them. I'm not. But when people tell me they get to the pot of gold of happiness, I just tear up because that's what it's about. It's what our life's supposed to be like. So I really push in the sports industry. People know I can be annoying. I'm going to keep doing it because I'm really trying to help these amazing individuals that are dedicating so much of their life. And afterwards, it's tough when people retire from sport. So I am trying to change not the individual experience. I want to change the systems. That we need the foundation to take the science and put it into the system to set them up well. We're not doing that.
Well, Martin, I couldn't agree more with Dr. Sam. Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. I've had a lot.
Thank you so much.
I've had some really good golden nuggets that have been extracted from today's conversation.
Yeah.
And Martin and I will take with it when we build. Thank you for your time and energy. We're very, very grateful.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This is great. Good luck. I'll be listening in.
Please do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. Cheers.
You take care, Sam.
Bye.
Bye. Wow, Martin.
Wow, another great episode. Learned so much.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, her approach. You know, individualization by understanding the different brains of people to get the best out of them, because people are different. And if we're doing one size fits all initiatives, it's not going to work long term, which we're experiencing now. So yeah, Dr. Sam, what an episode.
Absolutely. So we're going to be back next week, same time. We're going to be talking about curiosity. It's now going to be, by 2030, it's one of the top 5 in-demand skills. It's a lost art of the curiosity. So we'll be talking about that and a little bit more next week.
There we go.
So yes, this has been the Performance Economy. I'm Martin Sandu. This is Will Mellors-Blair. We will see you next week. Amazing.